Welcome back. This is Craig. We're continuing with our Kids Club magazine cover that we are creating together and learning Photoshop. So I thought I would take some time. Last video tutorial we color corrected the photograph. So I thought I'd pause for a second, and before we get into doing the type and kind of drawing these shapes, building these rectangles, talk a little bit about the transform tool. Photoshop does transform in a pretty unique way. Similar to some of the other programs, but since this is dealing with photographs, type, mostly it's rasterized instead of vector like Illustrator. I'll walk you through some of the ways to change things and transform them. So the first thing we'll do is just real simple. We'll look at the photograph. I simply copied the photograph or a portion of the photograph of the girl, brought it over here. This could be any photograph that you bring into Photoshop. It's on its own layer, so I will make sure that I have that layer selected, and then simply type Command T, and that will get your bounding box up here. So if I zoom in here a little bit, you see the bounding box. And now there's a couple things I can do. If I hover over the corner, you see I get the little double arrow here. I can click and drag down. Notice that it's doing like skewing it a way I don't want to. If I want to do it proportionately to the original, I just hold down my Shift key, and that will make sure that when I scale it, it stays proportional and she doesn't look really squished this way or that way. So I can do it, scale it this way. You really don't ever want to scale up, you want to scale down. With the resolution, this file is at 400 pixels per inch. You need at least a good 300 pixels per inch to do something for print, about 100 pixels per inch to do something for web or for screen. But the reason I can, or the way I can tell if I'm under 100% or if I'm going over 100% to enlarge it, is right up here I have my width and my height, and it shows me that right now I'm at 100.64 on this one, 101%. So as soon as I get up above that 100%, I don't want to go any larger than 100%. So stay underneath. If you go larger, what's happening is Photoshop starts to enlarge your photo, and it starts to guess at what the pixels should be as it fills them in. We refer to it as interpolation. And the guesswork sometimes will make your photograph look blurry and not real good if you enlarge it past 100%. So this is the first way and simplest way to scale. Now you notice when I hover over this, I will also get the up-down arrow. That means that I can just, or the up and down arrows, that means I can just skew it this way. Sometimes you'd want to do that with type, or maybe a rectangle or an object, but I wouldn't recommend doing it with a photograph for obvious reasons here. Okay, so I will Command Z to get back to that. Same works if you hover over the corner here, just a little bit above. You notice you get kind of the arrow that goes left and down. This is your rotate. So if I click and drag, this will rotate it. And if you look up here, you can see the rotation. You can also see it in the little black box. It tells you the degrees that you are rotating. So if you're looking for an exact 15 degrees, just dial it in until you get to 15 and release. If you would like to go in increments, you can go in increments if you want. If you hold your Shift key down, and that's going through 0, 15, 30, and then 45, and then it goes back down. Okay. Move this back up here. While you have the bounding box on, you can still click on your layer and move it around as well. If you want to position it, if you wanted it just underneath the type here in a certain way, if you wanted to Command R and bring your rulers up, sometimes we'll bring this over and you'll set this right on 0, and you want to make it a certain width, you can do it that way. You can also certainly type in the width up here under your XY coordinates too. My ruler is set. This is set to pixels. But you can adjust it that way as well. So what you can also do is you can also hold down your Control key and click. Notice I get the little menu up there on my pointer tool. When I have this in my bounding box, which means I typed Command T, hold your Control and click, and you see you have a bunch of different options in here. You can flip it, you can rotate it, and you can scale it, rotate, skew. Some of these, just play around with them, get a feel for them. I use skew sometimes with type, and that just allows you to skew something back and forth this way, or you can skew it this way, up and down. So I'm going to, let me back up a little bit. If you go to distort, distort will give you one corner you can move here, and you can see how it kind of puts it in a weird perspective mode. Again, there isn't a lot of time when you use these. I will say that I do use this when we mock up packaging and we're trying to take a design and warp it to the perspective of the front of a box or something. We do use the distort for that. Perspective allows you to kind of show a perspective here. There she has kind of a, they used to do this skit on Jay Leno, where now she looks like she has a big chin. So you can do a distort, make it look kind of funny this way if you'd like. And warp, I'm going to wait, let me, don't apply this. Warp is kind of interesting. I'm going to do Command T again, and then I can select warp. Otherwise, right up here in the menu bar up here, I can click warp this, and you have you can just do custom, and you have handles here, so you can adjust this if you want to. Sometimes with photographs that are a little bit fish-eyed, I have taken some of that fisheye out by using this tool. You can also do a lens correction, which is a little bit more accurate, but sometimes you have to use these tools to do this. Now they also have under warp, they have a whole bunch of presets, which are kind of fun. If I do an arc, it puts her on an arc, and if I zoom out a little bit, I can adjust the amount of arc on there, go on the bottom too, or on the top. The arc I can do, we'll just choose a couple other ones. Fisheye, you can do kind of like a shape of a fish, and then you can adjust that either way. So it gives you some fun things. This fish, then this is probably works a little bit better when you use it on type. Again, I wouldn't find a lot of uses for it, but I'm just showing you how to do transform in Photoshop. So I'm going to click here to not apply, and I'm going to jump up to my transform layer, which has the type on here. I will Command T and we'll do the same thing up here. Notice it does similar things where you can rotate here, you can size it if you want this way. I'm holding my shift key down. If you don't hold your shift key, you can skew it and kind of flatten it, stretch it. I can also click up here and I can do, this is where I was telling you before, I could do the fish, and you can change your type into the form of the fish if you want, adjust it. You could do an arc. This is something you could potentially use, and this is certainly something you might use on in designs. And you can also control click again, and you don't have everything available for your type, but you can certainly do different things. I can flip it horizontally, flip it back. So you have some of the same controls you have to transform type as you do for a photograph. Now if I were to draw a rectangle, fill it with this blue. If I had a rectangle, this is on a separate layer, Command T, this acts exactly like it did with the photograph and exactly like it did with the type. I can adjust it, I can swivel it, change it, whatever I want to do. Hold Control, click to get all of these. Here you don't really see the perspective as much because I have a solid color. But the Command T transform works with any kind of an object you have on a separate layer. Okay, so that is a transform tool in Photoshop. Thank you.